Low interest rates are here to stay. Let's have a look. Good morning, everyone. I'm Florian Heise, and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've got my first stein of coffee for the new week, and I thought we would have a look at this article written by Ian Verenda on ABC, an analysis about the market and the low interest rates, which are essentially here to stay for the foreseeable future. So let's have a look. But before we get into it, just a reminder to those of you that may have had your head buried in the sand, but our cash rate is insanely low. It is insanely low, guys. 0.75%, and there's predictions of 2 more rate cuts next year. Some people are saying in February we'll hit another one. I'm waiting to see the retail sales figures over the Christmas period to see if that will influence our governor of the Reserve Bank and the board. I've got another article coming up I want to look at later today, which is to do just with the bushfires and the actual impact that's having on tourism. There's another part of the economy that's a big employer that is going to feel it. So let's have a look. Markets are driving economic policy rather than reacting, and no one knows how to unwind it. Now, this is a really good point, because if we have a look at if we look at the United States, if we look at Japan, once these economies start down this QE path, and QE has got, fake QE at the moment with the repo market, can they ever undo it? Can they ever undo it? They tried to put up rates in the US, and the economy just sputtered. Once we fall into that trap, are we stuck there? What do you think, guys? Are we stuck in this artificially suppressed, low interest rate environment because no one will want to cop the political damage of being the leader during a recession? That's the question I put to you once we get, we're making a deal with the devil to get these low rates, to keep the economy going, to keep the property market going. When, if we look at it, the building sector is down and rates are still very low. We had that little jump back up. It's trending down, guys. Everything is looking bad. Even car sales are not doing too well over the year. Purple is this year, compare it to previous years. And mortgage rates, people in arrears on their mortgages, people in negative equity. I know people are saying, it's still not much, Florian, it's only 1.5%. But the delta change from 0.5% over 1.5%, that's a huge leap. A huge proportional leap. Looking at Western Australia right there on that chart, guys. And what would that do from a psychological perspective if you're trapped in negative equity? It's going to affect you on your day-to-day. It's going to affect your mental health. It's going to affect your whole life. So we will see. We will see what will happen. Let's have a look at this take. So, ever had the sinking feeling you're in over your head, that you'll never be able to get on top of that mountain of debt? And what about interest rates? How on earth would you cope if they ever return to anything like normal? The good news is, at least for those mortgaged to the hilt, is that rates are likely to stay extremely low for a very long time. We're talking years, perhaps even a decade, maybe longer. Now, the question I put to you with regards to that statement is, what happens? What happens? And I will bring up a website here, one of my favorite ones. So I'll bring up two, guys, and we'll just jump over and have a look. We've got here the Australian to US dollar. Right now it's sitting at 68.3 US cents per dollar. And we'll jump out. Let's have a look, just all this data. We'll jump out here. Now the lowest it was in 2002 in memory was down at 45 cents. What happens if it got down to 45, 46 cents again? Do you think the Reserve Bank would intervene? Do you think they would intervene to drive the rates up? Because you have to remember, everyone, it'll make all our exports fantastic in our primitive economy. Okay, we're not a very advanced economy. We're a colony. Okay, I think Australia needs to stop pretending we're a nation. We're a colony that got lucky. Okay? How much of everyone's saying how advanced it is in the mining. Someone left a comment. Sure, it's advanced in how they're extracting the minerals, that's fine. But if all the machinery used to do that is imported from overseas, we had a job where we were upgrading lifts in a high-rise tower. The old engines were made in Newcastle. Where do you think the new ones were made in? Spain. All imported. But the issue is all of these goodies will cost more, significantly more. If the dollar dropped by a third, it's pretty fair to say everything goes up by a third. How do you think that may be good for the services industries in Australia? See, as an architect, we had the challenge, and it clicked. I was talking to Rachel about it the other day, that we were competing in a local market because we could really generally only work with businesses based in Brisbane. Sure, we had worked on projects all around the world, but the businesses we dealt with were in Brisbane because people still want to meet with you face to face when you're working on projects or rollout. So we could service a local market, but we were competing with the international sector. We were competing with firms that would hire draftees on the other side of the planet, or whole teams for the cost I would have to pay one student. So it's an interesting and challenging environment. So if the dollar falls down, guys, so if we hit back to these rates, and everything overseas, they want you to pay them in US dollars, which is understandable, it's going to mean that, it'll be less competitive to offshore that work. And maybe that will mean a return of more work to Australia. But then all these cost of living increases is, I think, going to decimate that. So that's the scenario, guys. While people are claiming that interest rates are going to stay low forever and a day, if the dollar plunges and quality of life starts going down and cost of living shoots up dramatically, what do you think the RBA is going to do to try and prop up the dollar? Well, interest rates will slowly or sharply creep back up. See what happens. Let me know what your opinion on that is, guys. So, the reason is that hiking interest rates would cause too much pain and possibly trigger a recession even worse than the crisis that shook Western capitalism to its core a decade ago. That's because central banks globally have boxed themselves into a corner. They literally have nowhere to go. Well, that's not entirely true. They certainly have somewhere to go. They can go negative. They can go negative interest rates. In the WTO, this isn't just crazy conspiracy stuff. This is advanced monetary policy. And the WTO, the World Trade Organization, has released papers and research on how you could implement it, particularly having a dual currency system, a digital dollar and a physical dollar. And then you have an exchange rate that depreciates the value of the physical dollar over time to offset the ability of people to hoard cash. But you don't need to worry about that when you've got a cash transaction ban that just sailed through the House of Reps here in Australia without a problem. At Christmas dinner, I was talking to a relative, a farmer, and he was saying how he's got, he knows all blokes there that will go buy an entire ute just with cash. They've done cash their whole life. That's how they do it. I mean, you can't always get mobile reception there, can you guys? Can you? Cash still is king. Even though I can't remember the last time I made a huge purchase in cash, and I'm sure a lot of you wouldn't use it either, but still, just having that right. But nonetheless, they do have somewhere to go. They have negative interest rates, so I don't know why Ian isn't bringing that up. Because there's precedent of it. There is historical precedent, and it's actually happening around the world. So they've encouraged so many individuals, corporations, and governments to borrow so much by slashing interest rates to the lowest level in 5,000 years that any future rate hikes potentially can cause enormous damage. Okay, see, this is just a pointless claim. This 5,000-year claim is ludicrous because you're comparing fiat currency, which is paper money, which is meant to have a represented value, with real money, or money backed by gold, or money backed by materials. So this 5,000-year claim is a bit of a joke. 5,000 years ago, they also had debt jubilees. Why don't we bring some of those back? You want to stimulate the economy rather than doing QE, just pay off everyone's credit card. Oh, it's all printed money. It's not going to cost anyone anything. They'll just create it out of nowhere, out of thin air. And that'll stimulate the economy, or will it terrify people? What would happen? Let me know your opinion in the comments on that one, guys. Oh, and I know it's socialism. It's insane. So here at home, it's all about housing. Real estate now drives our domestic economy. Rather than attempting to cool a runaway market, the Reserve Bank once again is fueling another boom. And I will bring up one of my favorite quotes from Mr. Berry about Australia's GDP growth. 2016, 67% of the GDP growth came from Sydney and Melbourne, and a quarter of that came from property. Just dwell on that, guys, if you're not familiar with that quote. Have a look at his article he wrote about Australia being built on a house of cards. 57% of our wealth, of our civilization, is in property, either in owner homes, investment homes, or through super. 57%. So even if we had more economic stimulus and people going, oh, there's good debt and bad debt, yada, 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 where do you think it's all going to go? It's just going to drive up that housing bubble, guys. And housing isn't affordable. Housing is not affordable. And a big chunk of it, I'm just finding this chart here that I want to bring up that I do all the time. A big chunk of it was stimulated by foreign investment, an insane amount. Because our governments, our state governments, they're addicted to this stamp duty. This is the problem when you've got these governments that are you've got one hand controlling the revenue and same hand controlling the people that are coming into the country, or the immigration flows, or the rate of growth. There's no incentive for them to, take a longer term outlook on it. Just look at our water infrastructure, how far behind we've fallen there, guys. So, in fact, in the absence of further help from the federal government, it has thrown caution to the wind, and it's banking on housing as its main weapon to keep our sputtering economy from stalling. 2 years ago, our monetary meanderings were fretting about a housing bubble blowing up the economy, and successfully engineered a gradual deflation, did they? But as housing prices went south, households stopped spending, and the residential construction boom ground to a halt, threatening to push unemployment higher. Well, yes, unemployment is not looking too good. Even worse, the price declines left thousands of households carrying more debt than the value of their property, particularly in Western Australia. That posed a serious risk to the banking system, given our housing debt has trebled over the past 15 years to around $1.8 trillion. I mean, here you go. Billions Australian home loans. I mean, look at that, guys. Just from 04 to 18. Look at that. The end result? Borrowing restrictions were relaxed, and the RBA since has cut rates 3 times, with another due as early as February. It's now hoping that higher house prices will make consumers feel wealthier and start spending again. There's just one hitch. House prices again have surged in Sydney and Melbourne, and if the recent blistering pace is maintained, we'll be back at bubble levels early next year. So that's questionable. But then again, if the media pushes it a lie enough, people believe it enough, don't they? So, how Wall Street ate itself. We're not alone in this. Cast your mind back to this time last year. Global stock markets led by Wall Street were in turmoil, and a mild panic had begun to creep in. The parallels with our housing market are uncanny. The US Federal Reserve, having narrowly avoided economic catastrophe in 2008 by cutting rates to zero and implementing 3 massive rounds of monetary printing, figured it was time to unwind the stimulus. Between late 2016 and the end of last year, it hiked rates 8 times, pushing them up to 2.5%. Most ordinary Americans were unfazed by the gradual hikes, unemployment was low, and the economy seemed to be on the mend. Midway through last year, however, Wall Street caught a case of the yips. Investors hit the sell button as fear took hold that American companies wouldn't cope, and debt was to blame. For the past decade, corporate America has been on a borrowing binge. US corporate debt now stands at an eye-watering $10 trillion. The problem is, instead of tipping the cash into productivity-enhancing investments, corporate America plowed most of the debt into buying their own shares. Last year alone, American companies spent $1 trillion buying their own stock. In fact, share buybacks, as they are called, has been the bedrock of Wall Street demand in recent years. And why on earth would any chief executive do this? Well, we all know why. To pump up the value of their stock. I mean, the money is so cheap to get because it's not real. It's generating it out of thin air. So, first, it's an easy and tax-effective way to distribute cash back to shareholders. But the real reasons are that the extra demand for stock boosts the share price, and because there are fewer shares on issue, it creates the illusion that earnings per share are rising. And that is a very good point that Ian is making here. That's something you have to remember. It's an illusion, everyone. It just so happens that most executive bonuses are based on rising share prices and earnings per share. This graph from investment bank Morgan Stanley highlights the folly of what has been occurring in the US. Once you add in dividends, American companies have been paying more than 100% of those earnings to shareholders. That's not sustainable, as investors discovered in 2001 during the dot-com bust and 2008 as the GFC took hold. So, when interest rates are cut to zero, when the cash you're borrowing is essentially free, those running the show look like geniuses. But when interest rates start to rise, that debt needs to be serviced. That's why Wall Street began to tank late last year. Corporate America couldn't afford the higher interest payments because it had been borrowing cash to pass on to shareholders. All the debt, nothing to show for it. See, the issue is here. The banks, the Federal Reserve, by artificially setting this rate at zero, they've created this mess. It's just more manipulation into the market, guys. This isn't capitalism. This isn't a completely free market. This is a manipulated market where they're attempting to manage it and manipulating it just with a few triggers. But we can see it's an emergent system, so the effects just ripple through the economy, and we're seeing this. Do you think they foresaw this? I hope they didn't. I really hope they didn't. Under pressure from a furious President Donald Trump, the US Federal Reserve reversed course and cut rates twice. Low interest rates were supposed to boost business investment. Instead, they've artificially inflated Wall Street, and now the Federal Reserve is too scared to push rates any higher for fear of spiking a market crash. As Fed Chief Jerome Powell noted in May, could the increase in business debt pose greater risks to the financial system than currently appreciated? My colleagues and I continually ask ourselves that question. Wall Street punched through new records a fortnight ago as the longest bull run in American history continues. So the role reversal. Once upon a time, financial markets reacted to government and central bank policies. Now it's the reverse. Markets are driving policy. Once upon a time, financial markets reflected or tried to anticipate what was happening in the real market. Now they're leading it. Just as debt can turbocharge returns to a bull market, it can magnify losses in a downturn. And with so much outstanding debt, with corporates and households so leveraged, a rise in interest rates could undermine markets, threatening consumption and growth. That's what has trapped central banks. They've gone to the extreme end of monetary policy, they've encouraged a huge uptake in debt, and they've pushed asset prices into the stratosphere, widening the gulf between those who have assets and those who don't. It has distorted resource allocation and encouraged investors to take on far more risk than they'd ordinarily be comfortable with, just to get a return. It has also been hugely successful in staving off market collapse, but for how long? Maybe years. No one knows how to unwind this. No one can afford to have it unwind. The pain will be too much to bear. I think that's a very appropriate ending to this article that Ian is putting forward, because it would be too much to bear. Will it unwind? Can it go on forever? Or are people waking up? Are we seeing this decline in consumer confidence? Are people becoming more aware? Are people provided with more access to information, more access to knowledge themselves, so they won't be nudged as much? How much longer will it go on for? Do you think it will happen here in Australia? Well, guys, let me know your opinions and how you think this will work out. What are you doing to prepare? I think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people aren't. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you enjoy our content and want to help us produce more, we have a Patreon where you can make a small monthly donation. And welcome to my new patrons. Thank you very much who just signed up. We also have PayPal where you can make a direct donation. We have Amazon and eBay affiliate links, a great way for you to support a content creator without spending an extra cent. If they don't have one, encourage them to get it. It doesn't cost them anything. And otherwise, the money just goes to Amazon. And finally, we have merch on the Heise Says website. We have our pocket squares that are handmade here in Brisbane, on the other side of this house by Rachel. Take care, guys. Have a great day, and I will talk to you all later. Bye for now.